There's a certain comfort in routines. You wake up to the same soft light slipping through the curtains, drink the same coffee, listen to the same voice say good morning. It doesn't feel like a cage, not when you've built it yourself, brick by quiet brick, with someone you trust. At least, I thought I did. Elena and I had been married 6 years. No children. Not by accident, but by design. We both agreed early on that we weren't ready. Maybe we never would be. But we had our rhythm. We shared the grocery list, the Sunday drives, the way she always curled her feet under her on the couch, even in summer. She worked in pharmaceutical logistics. High-level partnerships, she'd say. Lots of travel, lots of structure. I always found that ironic. She thrived in control, while I worked with chaos. I managed residential property, tenants, repairs, late-night plumbing disasters. Somehow, we balanced each other. Our evenings were quiet. She'd read reports while I reviewed maintenance logs. Sometimes we'd share a glass of wine and trade stories about our days. We didn't fight. We didn't gush either. We simply functioned. And maybe that's where I got it wrong. Maybe I confused smoothness with strength. The only wrinkle in our routine was Grandpa Harold. He was my last living relative, my father's father, now in his 80s and fighting more battles than a body should. The man who raised me after my parents' accident, who taught me to tie a tie and drive stick. For the last few months, his health had been rapidly declining. Kidney failure, short-term memory loss, brittle bones. It was like watching a mountain erode grain by grain. Elena had always been respectful toward him, but not warm. She visited when I asked, smiled politely, brought soup. But there was distance. She called him, your grandfather, even after years of marriage. Still, I didn't press. It wasn't her family, and I never expected her to love him the way I did. She showed up. That counted. We'd visit the hospital every few days. I'd sit by his bed, read headlines, hold his hand. He didn't always know who I was, but he squeezed back. Elena would stand near the window, arms crossed, occasionally checking her phone. I told myself it was just her way. Then came the Thursday morning when the hospital called. Grandpa had taken a bad turn. Some infection, high fever, confusion. They were moving him to another facility across town. When I told Elena, she barely blinked. You should go, I said. I'll head over after I get the documents signed with the Rossner tenants. But she shook her head. No, I'll go. You've got back-to-back appointments, right? I hesitated. Yeah, but I've got time today, she insisted. I'll check in on him. Bring some things. You can go tomorrow. It was kind of her. Thoughtful. Maybe a little unlike her, but not enough to raise alarms. I thanked her. She kissed my cheek. That evening, she said Grandpa had been mostly asleep, and that the nurses seemed confident he'd stabilize. And just like that, life returned to normal. Or so it seemed. The room was dim, as hospital rooms often are. Machines hummed softly, plastic tubes whispered with quiet rhythm. Grandpa Harold lay still beneath thin sheets, his chest rising and falling with effort. He'd been moved to this smaller facility for closer monitoring, which really meant fewer staff, more silence, and less oversight. He didn't speak much anymore. His memory came and went like waves on a worn shore. Elena had brought him a fresh pair of socks, a blanket, and his favorite brand of cough drops. She always did the practical things. That day, she arrived alone, as planned. She signed in at the front, smiled politely at the nurse on duty, and made her way to room 213. The door clicked softly behind her. She stood there for a moment, watching Harold. He looked asleep. Not deeply, but still enough for her to assume what she always assumed, that the old man wouldn't register a thing. She set her purse down quietly, pulled out her phone, and walked to the far corner of the room, near the window. Then she dialed. The voice on the other end picked up quickly. She smiled. A real one. The kind I hadn't seen on her face in years. I'm here, she whispered. Yeah, he's asleep. Out cold. She chuckled, low and dry. No, it's honestly perfect. I did the good wife thing. Checked in, fluffed his pillow, played the role. He probably thinks I'm Mother Teresa. A pause. Then more laughter. No, I haven't told him yet. What's the point? He's still clinging to the idea that his grandson worships him. That whole inheritance thing, it's ridiculous. He's going to die thinking he left something meaningful behind. Her tone hardened, sharpened. Jason's still clueless. He actually thanked me this morning. I swear. Sometimes I think he'd fold laundry for anyone who smiled at him the right way. A sigh. After this, I'm heading back to the hotel. I booked the extra 5 nights. To unwind after the conference. He didn't even ask. She giggled again. I swear, baby, we're almost there. A couple more months. Let him keep working and paying the bills. Then I'll make my move. She paced slowly, occasionally glancing back at the bed. No, he hasn't changed the will yet. Everything still goes to Jason. And you know what? That's fine. We'll split it once he's gone. The place, the savings, the investments. And if Jason wants to be noble and walk away, let him. Makes it easier. Then silence. A rustle. She hung up. Harold hadn't moved. Not a blink. Not a twitch. But he had heard every word. It was hard to say what he felt in that moment. Hurt. Yes. Anger. Maybe. But above all, clarity. He saw the woman for who she was, not the one who brought soup or folded his cardigan, but the one who counted the days till his death like an upcoming vacation. He waited until she left. Only when the door clicked shut did he let out a breath he didn't realize he'd held. That night, he asked the nurse to call me. Not my wife. Just me. The hospital called around mid-morning. A nurse I didn't recognize said Harold had specifically asked for me. Not Elena. Just me. She said he'd refused visitors the night before, but when she passed by his room that morning, he asked clearly and urgently for his grandson. I was already halfway through my day, paperwork piled on the desk, maintenance requests from 3 buildings waiting for replies, but something about the nurse's tone wouldn't let me ignore it. I rescheduled my meetings and drove across town in silence. When I stepped into his room, I expected to see the same fragile version of him I'd grown used to: distant eyes, confused mumbling, long moments of silence. But his gaze was sharp, focused. As soon as he saw me, his hand lifted, weak but deliberate, motioning toward the chair beside his bed. Close the door, he said. Voice cracked, but clear. I obeyed without a word. The quiet that settled between us was thick, like the air before a storm. She was here yesterday, he said. I nodded, cautiously. I know. Elena told me. She said you were mostly asleep. He huffed, not quite a laugh, more like bitterness barely contained. She thought I was, he said. Eyes closed doesn't mean ears closed. I leaned forward slightly. He didn't blink. I heard her, he continued, talking on the phone. With a man. I sat back, arms crossed unconsciously. What kind of conversation? The look he gave me was the same look he used to give me as a kid when I lied about brushing my teeth. She said terrible things, Jason, he said slowly. About me. About you. She laughed. Not the way people laugh when they're happy. The way people laugh when they're getting away with something. I didn't speak. My chest felt suddenly tight. She called you gullible, he went on. Said you still believed everything she told you. Said you didn't even ask about the hotel she booked. He took a slow breath. And me? I was just a formality. A dying man with a name on a piece of paper she couldn't wait to rewrite. I swallowed hard, shaking my head slightly. Grandpa, are you sure you didn't mishear something? Maybe she was I'm old, not gone, he snapped, sharper than I'd heard in months. I know what I heard. I laid there, stone still, and listened to your wife talk about our lives like they were props in a play she's tired of acting in. I looked down at my hands. I wanted to laugh, brush it off, call it confusion, or the ramblings of an aging mind. But the way he looked at me, firm, unblinking, stopped me. She said once I was gone, everything you inherited would be easy to split, he added. That you wouldn't fight. That you'd just hand it over, grateful she stayed as long as she did. I clenched my jaw. I didn't know who she was talking to, he said after a moment, but the way she spoke, she trusted him. Not just some fling. Someone she planned with. The words settled in my chest like wet cement. I stood up, paced to the window, then turned back. Maybe she just said things in frustration. People say things when they think no one's listening. He shook his head, slow and deliberate. She didn't sound frustrated. She sounded free. I rubbed my face. Did she say a name? No, he admitted. But it doesn't matter. What matters is you deserve to know who you're living with. I didn't say anything. I just sat back down, my mind spinning in slow circles. I remembered the way she dismissed his medical updates lately, how she hesitated before answering questions about visiting him, how she always handed me the phone when his name popped up. She thinks you're asleep too, he said, softer now. But I know you, Jason. You wake up eventually. I left not long after, promising I'd be back soon. I didn't mention the conversation to Elena that night. I couldn't. Not yet. But something had shifted. I no longer looked at her the same way. Every word, every glance, every pause in conversation, I felt myself watching, not sharing. She laughed at a commercial during dinner, and I wondered how real that sound was. She asked me to pass the salt, and I noticed how little her eyes moved toward mine. At the time, I didn't know if I believed him fully, but I knew one thing with complete certainty. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't trust my wife. It's strange how quickly perception shifts once the lens cracks. The same conversations, the same routines, they don't feel familiar anymore. They feel staged. Like someone hit replay on a scene I'd watched 100 times, except now I could see the lines in the paint, the uneven cuts in the set. The night after my visit to the hospital, Elena was unusually cheerful. She asked about my day, made chicken piccata from scratch, even lit a candle at dinner. The kind of effort you don't notice until it doesn't fit anymore. I nodded, smiled, answered like I was supposed to, but something inside me was pulled tight, waiting to snap. I started noticing how rarely she asked about Grandpa. And when she did, it was formulaic, like reciting lines from a card. "How's he doing?" she asked that night while folding laundry. "Same," I said. "Tired." "Quiet." "That's good." It wasn't. But she didn't ask further. She never did. That weekend, I went to check on one of my rental properties a few streets over. As I locked the door behind me, I saw Mr. Wilkins, our neighbor from across the street, watering his hedges. He was retired, former firefighter, the kind of man who still ironed his jeans. We often exchanged small talk, weather updates, football predictions. That day, though, he called me over. "How's your grandfather, Jason?" I sighed. "Not great. He's hanging in there, but it's been rough." He nodded, serious. "I asked your wife the other day. She was coming back from the store. Thought I'd be neighborly." I waited. She just shrugged and said, "Hopefully not much longer." He frowned. Didn't seem concerned. My breath caught. "Sorry," he added quickly. "None of my business." Maybe she meant it differently. But she didn't. The next day, Mrs. Geller, who lived 2 doors down, stopped me on my way to the car. "Elena still working long hours?" she asked. "Sometimes," I replied carefully. She didn't seem happy when I mentioned your grandfather. Said something like, "Old people just want attention, even on their way out." The words hit harder than they should have. Not because they were so awful, though they were, but because they aligned perfectly with what Harold had told me. Her tone, her ease, the practiced cruelty behind closed doors. And suddenly, little things started clicking. The time she left the hospital early, saying the smell made her nauseous. The way she once complained about Grandpa's pension paperwork cluttering the kitchen table. Her refusal to learn even basic updates about his health, dialysis times, medication schedules, emergency contacts. It wasn't absence. It was active disinterest. That night, we were watching a show she liked, something about wine and crime, and I caught her smiling at her phone. She typed quickly, paused, erased, typed again. I glanced sideways. "Work." She looked up, surprised, like I'd caught her sleepwalking. "Yeah, just Jill from the Chicago team. Finalizing schedules." I nodded. Said nothing. The show kept playing. But I wasn't really watching. Later that evening, she mentioned her upcoming conference. It's in Portland this year. 7 days. They're doing a full partner workshop with breakout sessions and team-building stuff. I just listened. 7 days. The way she said it, like it was a blessing. Like she'd been given a week off from pretending. She reached for her tea. "I booked my return for next Sunday night. Just in time for your inspection meeting Monday, right?" She remembered my calendar. Always had. Always made sure we didn't overlap too much. I smiled, faintly. Perfect. But in my head, I was already checking dates. Making mental notes. Marking the beginning of her trip not as her absence, but as my window. There was a gap between us now. Not a blowout, not a Cold War. Just a steady unraveling of what I used to call home. And every polite silence, every dismissive answer, every hollow smile, it all added threads to a pattern I could no longer ignore. I didn't say anything that night, but I knew what I had to do next. She left on a Wednesday morning, a sleek gray suitcase in tow, phone already pressed to her ear as she walked down the driveway. She blew me a kiss from the passenger seat of her Uber. I waved, and when she disappeared around the corner, I stood there for a long moment, longer than necessary. It wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It was stillness, the kind that settles in when you stop pretending something is alive just because it's moving. I went back inside and opened the folder Detective Morales had dropped off 2 days earlier. Standard procedure, he'd said, background, timelines, patterns. But now, the active part began. She's flying to Portland, I told him. Conference schedule says it runs Thursday and Friday. She's staying until the following Tuesday. I want to know where she actually is between those days. He'd only nodded. Consider it done. The first 2 days, Morales kept it simple. Arrival confirmed. Hotel matched her booking. Full attendance at the conference. But by Friday evening, the updates started changing. She left the hotel this morning with a man. Read the email. Same guy picked her up in a dark blue Tesla. Drove to a private apartment complex in northwest Portland. She hasn't left since. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Morales had attached a few photos. Low quality, zoomed from across the street, but unmistakable. Elena stepping into a building behind a man I didn't recognize. Her hand was on his lower back. She was smiling. I didn't forward the photos. I didn't even save them. I just sat there, the glow of the laptop flickering slightly on my skin. Saturday passed. Then Sunday. Each night, Morales sent more details, no new locations, same apartment, grocery runs for 2, deliveries under both names. I asked if he could confirm how long she'd been seeing this man. Can't say for sure, he wrote back. But based on previous records, they've traveled together before: Miami in March, Denver in July. Company credit card billed both times under client development. I read the line twice. They've traveled together before. I closed the laptop. Got in the car. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move. I ended up near the university I'd attended over a decade ago. The campus bookstore still stood on the corner. So did the coffee shop across from it. That's where I saw her, Sarah. We hadn't spoken in years. She was a history major with a wit sharper than most of our professors. We'd once spent 3 days writing an essay on civil disobedience, then skipped class to watch bad horror movies and eat gas station nachos. She looked up from her laptop as I walked in. Her face lit up with quiet surprise. Jason. I smiled, genuinely. Sarah? Wow. We sat. Talked. Nothing dramatic, no emotional revelations, no confessions. Just conversation. She was now a legal advisor for a private firm, lived not far from where we used to sneak out during finals. She asked about me, and I gave her the clean version. Property work. Married. Quiet life. She looked at me for a long moment. You always did carry too much silence, she said gently. I laughed. Not bitterly. Not sadly. Just like a man who forgot he still could. After an hour, we said goodbye. She scribbled her number on a napkin. Not for anything weird, she added. Just, don't forget to talk to people who knew you before you stopped asking for anything. I tucked it into my pocket. Driving home, I thought about Elena, not just where she was, but who she was with. And more than that, who she had become. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just knew. The woman who left my house 4 days ago wasn't coming back. And the man who watched her leave? He wasn't waiting anymore. Detective Morales returned with a full report 2 days before Elena's scheduled return. He didn't say much when he handed me the envelope, just, you might want to sit down when you go through this. I waited until he left before I opened it. Inside, printed photos, digital copies on a USB, itemized records, timestamps, and a breakdown of her movements from Portland to every trip she'd taken since March. She hadn't just lied. She built another life carefully, methodically, with attention to detail I'd once admired in her work ethic. Morales had captured them leaving the apartment 4 separate times, once for groceries, once for wine, once for what looked like a casual brunch, and once for what could only be described as a romantic walk through a city neither of them called home. Their hands weren't touching, but their bodies leaned in the way only certain people lean, with the ease of familiarity, with the kind of closeness that doesn't need announcing. Alongside the photos were payment logs, dinners for 2, Lyft receipts from her phone number to his address, bookings under company expense that corresponded with hotel check-ins in cities I'd never visited. Denver, Miami, Austin. She had called them partner meetings. Then came the texts. Not direct screenshots, Morales hadn't hacked her device, but message previews captured through synced push notifications from her email, still connected to her iPad at home. I'd forgotten it even existed. She hadn't. Can't wait for tomorrow, one message read. Counting hours. Another. You still has no idea. This week has been perfect. And then, soon. I promise. But it wasn't just what Morales had found. It was what my friend Leo, a systems engineer who owed me a favor, uncovered when I asked him to pull iCloud logs from her old backup account. He found a hidden album. Encrypted, renamed, tucked into a buried directory. 53 photos. Mostly selfies. Some with the same man. Hotel rooms. A wine glass with 2 reflections. A birthday cake I never saw. The file name on one photo said it all, March_weekend_use.jpg. Us. Not me. I called Sarah that night. She didn't ask questions, just invited me to her office after hours. She wore glasses she hadn't in college, and a blazer that made her look even more no-nonsense than I remembered. I slid the envelope across her desk. I want to make sure this doesn't fall apart in court. She went through everything. Quiet. Professional. Efficient. Legally, you've got enough, she said, finally. Infidelity's hard to prove when emotions are the only evidence. But this? Travel records, shared expenses, misleading professional use of funds, documented intimacy, it builds a strong narrative. And the apartment? I asked. She nodded. If she stayed there repeatedly, claimed it was business, and you have proof otherwise, you're protected. Especially with no kids involved. I exhaled. The air felt heavier leaving me than going in. Sarah leaned forward. You're not broken, Jason. You're just not done yet. Her words stayed with me that night. Not broken. Not done. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I no longer wanted to understand Elena. I wanted out. But not quietly. Not with questions. With clarity. In control. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break anything. I didn't even change my tone. What I did was schedule a meeting with a divorce attorney named Brenner. She had a quiet office uptown, lined with thick books and soft lamps. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with a calmness that came from dealing with men like me every week, men who looked fine on the outside but whose hands trembled slightly when they signed their name. I gave her the envelope. Let her read everything. When she finished, she only asked one question. Do you want discretion or exposure? Both, I said, but in the right order. She smiled. That can be arranged. We spent the next few days mapping it all out. My name was already on the house and the accounts, but we moved fast, closed the joint savings, restructured the brokerage access, set up a private checking account. I changed passwords, PINs, mailing addresses. Everything. Meanwhile, Morales updated me on her movements, still at the same apartment. Still playing house in someone else's arms. She'd text me once a day, neutral, casual. Everything okay at the house? Hope work's not too crazy. Can't wait to be home. I responded the same way, polite, predictable, brief. No suspicion. It gave me time to work. I boxed her things the day before she was set to return. All of it. Clothes, shoes, bags, makeup, framed pictures she probably forgot we even owned. I folded everything neatly. I didn't want her to accuse me of cruelty. Just finality. The boxes went into 2 large suitcases. I set them near the front door. Then I called the locksmith. While he worked, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. The same kitchen she once redesigned with bright cabinets and underlighting. She said it made the room feel cleaner. I wondered if she'd ever intended to stay long enough to enjoy it. When the locks clicked into place, I handed the locksmith a tip, thanked him, and walked through the house one last time, not because I was leaving, but because I was reclaiming it. I left the letter on the kitchen island. A printed copy of the divorce papers, the evidence log, and a short, typed note. These are yours. Delivered to you where you chose to be. I won't be here when you get back. You won't be here either. I'd already scheduled the courier. He would deliver the envelope to her, not at our home, but at his. The apartment where she'd spent her stolen days. The courier had clear instructions. Hand it directly to her, take a photo as proof of delivery, and say nothing more. That night, I didn't sleep. But I didn't toss or turn, either. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't mean emptiness. The kind that means peace. The courier arrived at precisely 9:15 a.m. He wore a company jacket, carried a tablet for digital signature, and held a plain, sealed envelope in his left hand. No markings. No logo. Just a delivery address and a name. Elena. She answered the door in a soft, oversized t-shirt and socks. Hair up, no makeup, still half asleep. The man behind her, the same one from Morales' photos, stood a few feet back, out of sight, but not out of reach. You could always tell when people were trying to hide their presence and failing. Package for Elena Carson, the courier said. She blinked, confused. I didn't order anything. It's not a product, he replied calmly. Signature required. She signed. He handed over the envelope. Walked away. She closed the door, tearing the seal almost immediately, expecting, what? Flowers? A note from a hotel concierge? Another pretense to keep the fantasy going? But it wasn't a note. Not in the usual sense. She stood there, flipping through the pages. Her eyes scanned too fast at first, the way people read when they're not reading, just looking for denial, a loophole, an out. Then her face changed. Her mouth fell slightly open. The color in her cheeks began to shift. Divorce papers. Filed. Signed. Copies of financial transfers. Documentation of account closures, property ownership updates. A ledger of her transactions, dates, amounts, recipients. GPS records. Hotel bookings. Photos. The final page held a message. Just one sentence. You lied in silence. I answered the same way. She stared at the last line as if it would erase itself if she focused hard enough. Behind her, the man, the one she'd led into the carefully staged set of her second life, said something low, cautious. She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her phone. Dial my number. Hands shaking. 1 ring. 2. 3. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. And again. Still nothing. The silence wasn't technical. It was intentional. She paced. Saturday. Stood. Called again. Typed out a message, then deleted it. Started another. Deleted again. She called my name out loud, though I wasn't there to hear it. Her voice, frantic, unsure. She wasn't used to not being answered. She tried the house line. Disconnected. Then her email. She opened it, typed fast, fingers trembling. But there was no reply. Because I wasn't watching. Because I didn't need to see her reaction. Because I already knew. I sat outside that day, in the backyard, under the maple tree I'd planted the year we moved in. Coffee in hand. Calm in chest. My phone vibrated once. Then twice. Then not again. I didn't look. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered. The cab pulled up to the house just before sunset. Elena stepped out in silence, phone clutched in her palm like a lifeline. She hadn't called in the past few hours. Maybe she realized there was no point. Maybe she told herself she'd fix it in person. That words, gestures, tears might still carry weight. She walked up the driveway with purpose, pulling her jacket tight. Her pace slowed when she saw them. 2 suitcases. Perfectly arranged. Not dumped, arranged. One on each side of the doormat. Clean. Deliberate. Her keys jingled as she reached the door. She tried the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Harder. Jammed it. Twisted, shook the knob. Nothing. She bent down, breath unsteady, and found a folded sheet of paper taped flat beneath the mailbox slot. A single sentence, typed. Take your things. Do not return. Court won't help you. The evidence speaks louder than you ever did. She read it once. Then again. And again. Cars passed behind her. A dog barked 2 streets over. Wind moved softly through the maple tree above. No lights on inside. No voices. No warmth. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of me, of a shadow, of something human still on the other side of the wall she once called home. But there was nothing. No audience. No stage. Only the consequences. She called my name once. Not loudly. Not desperately. Just a weak, broken sound that disappeared into the porch light. When no one answered, she crouched down beside the suitcases, pressed her fingers to her temples. For a moment, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Then she stood up, took the paper, took the bags, and walked away. No more second lives. No more performances. No more doors. Only the sound of her footsteps, fading down a driveway that no longer belonged to her.